Jennifer Rivers and her husband Michael had spent over a decade in their quiet San Diego suburb, living what appeared to be the perfect life. Michael, an engineer, provided financial security but was rarely home, consumed by long hours and business trips. Jennifer, a homemaker, had devoted herself entirely to their children and their home. But as the years passed, the walls of that home began to feel more like a prison. At first, the loneliness crept in slowly. Empty evenings, unanswered texts, the mechanical way Michael kissed her goodbye in the morning. Their children, now teenagers, had their own lives, their own secrets. Jennifer was left with silence, a silence that stretched across their pristine kitchen, their neatly made bed, the vacant space beside her at night. She had once dreamed of so much more, of adventure, of passion, but now she was invisible. Just a shadow moving through the routines of a life that no longer felt like her own. Then came Alex Carter, the 20-year-old son of their new neighbors, home from college for the summer. He was everything she had lost: youthful, vibrant, alive. Jennifer had seen him playing basketball in the driveway, sweat glistening on his skin, laughter in his voice. She told herself it was harmless, that she was just being friendly when their brief conversations stretched longer and longer. But deep down, she knew better. It was a sweltering afternoon when she invited him inside. A simple request, help with some household repairs while Michael was away. He agreed, and as they worked side by side, something shifted. The heat in the air wasn't just from the summer sun. The day stretched into evening, a shared meal, a lingering glance, words that brushed too close to the edge of something dangerous. For the first time in years, Jennifer felt wanted. And for the first time in years, she stopped thinking about consequences. Jennifer hadn't felt this alive in years. Alex didn't see her as just a housewife, a background figure in someone else's life. He looked at her, really looked at her, and she craved it. After dinner, their conversation deepened, shifting from casual pleasantries to whispered confessions. Alex spoke about feeling lost, about struggling to find his place in the world. His vulnerability pulled Jennifer in, making her feel needed, wanted. Then their eyes met, and the air between them tightened. The first kiss wasn't planned. It was sudden, like a violent crack in the foundation of everything Jennifer had built. But instead of fear or regret, she felt something else: release, a breaking free from the invisible chains of her perfect life. The moral lines she had spent years upholding blurred into nothing. From that night on, there was no stopping it. Every time Michael left for work or another business trip, Alex was there. Their encounters grew more reckless, more desperate. Jennifer told herself it wasn't just lust, it was salvation. In Alex, she saw the version of herself that time had erased. With him, she wasn't just a mother, just a wife. She was something more. But stolen moments can never last forever. The whispers started slowly, sideways glances from neighbors, lingering stares from acquaintances. She ignored them, convinced herself they didn't matter. But the fear took root, gnawing at the edges of her euphoria. Every encounter became more dangerous, every risk greater. She knew the truth would come crashing down eventually, but knowing didn't stop her. Jennifer was always on edge now, her pulse quickening at every glance, every murmur from the neighbors. She told herself she was being careful, that her excuses for Alex's frequent presence were believable, but deep down she knew the truth was hanging by a thread. The risk should have terrified her. Instead, it fueled her desire. One evening, after another feverish encounter, Jennifer lay awake, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It had sunk its claws into her, reshaping her world. She began to entertain dangerous thoughts, ones she had no business thinking. What if this didn't have to end? What if she and Alex could be together permanently? Months passed, and what once felt like an escape had become a necessity. Every moment without Alex felt hollow. The life she shared with Michael was now nothing more than a performance, a carefully rehearsed routine that had lost all meaning. She no longer saw her husband as a partner, just an obstacle standing in the way of what she truly wanted. Each morning, Jennifer woke up feeling torn apart. She lived two separate lives, and the weight of it was suffocating. But she couldn't stop, she wouldn't. For Alex, things were changing too. Jennifer wasn't just a fling anymore. She was something far more consuming. She understood him, made him feel seen in a way no one else had. But the deeper they fell, the heavier the reality became. He started noticing the way Jennifer clung to him, how her longing was no longer just passion, but something darker, something desperate. Doubt crept in. He hadn't planned for this, hadn't meant to get so entangled. And now, with every lingering touch, every whispered promise, he felt the walls closing in. He didn't want to hurt her, but he was beginning to see the truth. This couldn't last. Not without consequences. At home, Alex's father, David Carter, was growing suspicious. A man of rigid principles, he valued control, order, and discipline. David Carter prided himself on discipline, on control. His son had always followed the rules, always stayed on the right path. But lately, Alex had been slipping away, vanishing for hours, coming home at odd times. At first, David dismissed it as youthful restlessness, but Linda, his wife, was less willing to ignore the signs. She started asking questions, pressing Alex for answers, her concern laced with suspicion. And Alex knew, if the truth ever came out, it wouldn't just ruin him, it would destroy Jennifer. Yet despite the looming threat, they couldn't stop. Their secret meetings became more frequent, more desperate. The thrill of deception only heightened their obsession. They devised careful routines, encrypted messages, coded phrases, hidden meeting spots. Jennifer knew the risks, but the thought of stopping was unbearable. She needed Alex like air, and she would do anything to keep their world intact. Then, one evening, everything changed. Jennifer and Alex had slipped away to an isolated road on the outskirts of town, a place where no one should have found them. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to forget about Michael, about the watchful eyes of the neighbors, about the suffocating weight of their lies. But as Jennifer leaned against Alex, reveling in the fleeting illusion of freedom, a car passed slowly by. Its headlights cut through the darkness like a blade, illuminating them just long enough for Jennifer to feel a chill crawl up her spine. Someone had seen them. The moment passed, and Alex reassured her, brushing off her panic. But Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling. The walls around them were closing in. From that night on, the paranoia set in. Jennifer found herself dissecting every glance, every hushed whisper in the neighborhood. The once friendly smiles of her neighbors now felt like veiled accusations. The weight of deception pressed harder on her chest with every passing day. She had thought she could control it, but the lies were piling up too fast. Even Michael, her ever-distracted, work-obsessed husband, was beginning to notice. At first, his questions seemed casual. An offhand remark about how much time she spent on her phone, a raised eyebrow when she hesitated too long before answering. But then the subtle changes began. He started watching her more closely, lingering in doorways when she typed messages, turning up at home unexpectedly. Jennifer could feel his suspicion like a noose tightening around her neck. Michael was a rational man, not prone to paranoia, but even he couldn't ignore the signs. The way she jumped when he entered the room, the late-night whispers, the sudden secrecy. He didn't confront her outright, not yet, but he was watching, calculating. Jennifer knew, and no matter how much she tried to act normal, to smile through the tension, she also knew something else. It was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Jennifer's life had become a suffocating web of lies, tightening around her with every passing day. There was no turning back, no simple escape. She had built her world around Alex, and now that foundation was beginning to crack. One afternoon, while Michael was home, Jennifer received an unexpected message from Alex. He wanted to meet, somewhere far from prying eyes, a cafe on the other side of town. She hesitated. Something about his tone felt different, colder. But in the end, desire won over reason. She crafted another excuse, told Michael she needed to run errands, and slipped away. At the cafe, the atmosphere was tense. Alex wasn't his usual self. His words were careful, distant. Then he said it. Things had gone too far. Their affair had become dangerous, a risk neither of them could afford. He suggested they step back, take time apart before they got caught. Jennifer felt the blood drain from her face. The walls of the cafe closed in around her. Panic clawed at her throat. Take a break? No, that wasn't an option. Alex was the only thing keeping her from drowning in the monotony of her life. She tried to reason with him, to promise they'd be more careful. But Alex had made up his mind. Jennifer barely remembered the drive home. Her hands trembled on the wheel, her vision blurred with unshed tears. When she walked through the door, Michael was there, watching her. He didn't ask where she had been, didn't press for details. But his silence felt heavier than any confrontation. That night, lying in bed next to her husband, Jennifer realized something terrifying. She couldn't let Alex go. Days passed in a haze of obsession. She stopped caring about the house, about the kids. She existed in a state of restless agony, constantly checking her phone, waiting for a message that never came. But Alex was gone. He had erased himself from her life as quickly as he had entered it. Jennifer couldn't accept that. She found herself drawn to the window at odd hours, staring across the street at the Carter's house, searching for a glimpse of him. She took unnecessary trips to the store, wandered through the neighborhood, hoping, desperate for a chance encounter. But Alex was avoiding her, and the more he pulled away, the deeper her obsession grew. Meanwhile, Alex was battling his own demons. He couldn't forget Jennifer, but he knew this had gone too far. He just didn't realize how far she was willing to go. Alex was drowning in conflict. The pull of his feelings for Jennifer was undeniable, yet the weight of reality was suffocating. Their passion, once thrilling, had turned into an unbearable source of anxiety. He lay awake at night, haunted by the inevitable disaster waiting to unfold. Jennifer, however, refused to let go. The silence was eating her alive. One night, her hands trembling, she picked up her phone and poured her soul into a message. She begged him to meet her, to talk, to feel something again. She told him she couldn't exist without him. She hit send. No reply. Days crawled by before Alex finally answered. Just a few words. "This has to end. I'm sorry." Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. Her vision blurred. No, this wasn't how it ended. Not like this. She fired off another message, then another, but there was only silence. That silence festered inside her, warping into something darker. Desperation turned into obsession. She started watching him, tracking his movements, finding reasons to be near places he might be. Every glimpse of him ignited a painful mix of hope and rage. But he avoided her, slipping further from her grasp. At home, the walls were closing in. Michael saw it. He saw the way she had changed, the restless energy, the vacant stares, the irritation that simmered beneath her skin. She barely spoke to him, barely acknowledged the life they had built. At night, she lay beside him, but she was somewhere else. Michael started noticing things, the secretive glances at her phone, the way she recoiled at his touch, the tension in her jaw when he asked innocent questions. At first, it was just unease, a feeling he couldn't shake. But then the signs became impossible to ignore. Something was deeply wrong. Jennifer unraveled further with every passing day. She wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping, she was barely functioning. The final push came after another failed attempt to reach Alex, another cold rejection that shattered what little control she had left. That night, she drank too much. The room spun around her as she stumbled through the house, suffocating on her own thoughts. Michael watched her, jaw clenched. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He walked up to her, took her wrist, and held it tight. "Tell me the truth." Jennifer's breath hitched. The room felt too small, too bright, too inescapable. Then the words spilled from her lips like a confession at the gallows. She told him everything. And the moment the truth was out, something in Michael's eyes shifted. Something she had never seen before. Something irreversible. Michael sat in silence, his mind unraveling. The woman he had loved, trusted, built a life with, had betrayed him in the worst possible way. He replayed her words, dissecting every lie, every excuse she had fed him over the past months. The missed calls, the distracted looks, the whispers of suspicion he had tried to silence. It had all been real. Rage pulsed beneath his skin, but beneath that was something worse, emptiness. Jennifer sat across from him, her face pale, her lips slightly parted as if she wanted to take it all back. But it was too late. Michael finally spoke, his voice eerily calm. "I want a divorce." Jennifer flinched as if he had struck her. No, this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She had believed somehow that she could fix this, that she could get Alex back, that she could convince Michael to stay, that she wouldn't have to lose everything. But Michael's eyes held nothing for her now. No anger, no sadness, just cold resolve. She wanted to argue, to plead, but her throat felt tight, because deep down, she knew she had already lost. Meanwhile, Alex was unraveling in his own way. He had done everything to distance himself from Jennifer, to convince himself that walking away had been the right decision. But no matter how many times he tried to bury it, guilt clung to him like a second skin. His life had become suffocating, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. His parents noticed. His father, David, was watching him closely, concern masked by a harsh, quiet disappointment. His mother tried to comfort him, but Alex withdrew further, suffocating under the realization that he had helped destroy a family. He had seen Jennifer's desperation in those final texts, the way she lingered near his house, waiting for a chance encounter. He had ignored it, thinking it would pass. But now it felt like it never would. Weeks passed, and the Rivers household became a war zone. Jennifer and Michael could barely speak without it devolving into a vicious exchange of blame and resentment. The air in the house was thick with unspoken fury, their children trapped in the crossfire of their ruined marriage. Michael's bitterness deepened, but so did his silence. He didn't yell, he didn't lash out. He just watched. And as the night stretched on, something inside him shifted. Lying awake in the darkness, his mind conjured images he couldn't shake. Jennifer with him. Alex, young and arrogant, touching what wasn't his to take. Jennifer whispering to him, giving him the parts of herself that used to belong to Michael. The thought sickened him, and yet he couldn't stop playing the scenes over and over, his hands clenched into fists beneath the sheets. This wasn't just betrayal, this was humiliation, and humiliation demanded retribution. A new thought took root in his mind, cold and unwavering. This couldn't be forgiven. He slid out of bed, careful not to disturb Jennifer. She lay still, oblivious to the chaos unraveling inside him. In the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains, she almost looked innocent. Almost. Michael moved silently through the house, his bare feet soundless against the floor. In the kitchen, his fingers curled around the handle of a knife, the metal cold against his skin, the weight of it solid, reassuring. He didn't think about what came next. He just let his feet carry him forward, out of the house, across the silent street. The Carter house loomed in the darkness, its windows black voids. Michael's breath came slow, controlled, as he tested the front door. It gave way with a soft creak, unlocked. Inside, the silence was suffocating. He moved like a shadow through the hallway, his heartbeat steady, his grip on the knife tightening. Then he saw him. Alex lay on the couch, one arm draped over his chest, his breathing deep and untroubled. His face was slack with sleep, peaceful. Rage twisted inside Michael like a blade. How dare he sleep so soundly after shattering someone else's life? After stealing something that didn't belong to him? For a moment, Michael stood there, his hands trembling. Memories crashed into him, sharp and unrelenting. Jennifer's laughter, the warmth of their home before the lies, before him. Then Alex stirred. His eyes fluttered open, disoriented at first. Then he saw Michael. Confusion, then realization, then fear. Michael. His voice cracked, barely a whisper. His gaze flicked to the knife. His body tensed. But Michael had already moved. The first lunge sent Alex scrambling backward, his shoulder colliding with the coffee table. He gasped, knocking over a lamp, the dull thud of its fall swallowed by the rush of blood in Michael's ears. Alex kicked out desperately, trying to push himself away, but Michael was on him before he could rise. The knife found flesh, sinking deep, and Alex's body jerked violently. A strangled cry, a gasp. Michael didn't stop. Again. The warmth of blood spread across his hands, thick and sticky, but Michael felt nothing. No hesitation, no regret, only the cold certainty that this was justice. By the time he stopped, the room was silent except for the ragged sound of his breathing. He stepped back, staring at the lifeless body sprawled before him, the boy who had ruined everything. And yet, nothing changed. Jennifer was still gone. His life was still shattered, and now there was no going back. Michael stood over him, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. The knife slipped from his grip, landing with a dull, lifeless thud against the hardwood. Blood soaked his hands, his clothes. It clung to his skin, seeping into the cracks between his fingers. The sight of it felt distant, like something out of a nightmare, something that couldn't possibly be real. But it was. The weight in his chest told him that much. This was real. He had done this. Michael didn't move. He barely breathed. His mind struggled to catch up, to process the irreversible truth. There was no undoing what had just happened. No turning back. No waking up from this. Minutes passed, maybe hours. He couldn't tell. Finally, he turned, stepping carefully over the body as if disturbing it would somehow make it worse. He moved like a ghost through the house, pulling the door shut behind him with a quiet click. The night air hit him like a shock, but it did nothing to clear his mind. The street was empty, the world unchanged, oblivious to the horror that had just unfolded inside the Carter home. Each step he took felt heavier, dragging him down, but his body moved on instinct, carrying him home to the only thing that remained: Jennifer. Inside, the house was as he had left it: dark, silent, normal. Michael went straight to the bathroom and shutting the door behind him. He turned the faucet on full blast, watching the water swirl pink as it washed over his hands. The blood faded, but the feeling didn't. The cold water did nothing to quiet the pounding in his skull. He gripped the edge of the sink, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His own eyes looked foreign to him, haunted, hollow. The man standing there wasn't the same one who had left the house that night. That man was gone. Days passed, but time no longer felt real. When Alex's body was found, the town was thrown into chaos. The quiet suburban streets where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors exchanged friendly nods, suddenly felt unsafe. The news spread like wildfire, whispers turning into speculation, speculation into fear. The police launched an investigation, moving methodically, speaking to neighbors, friends, anyone who might have known anything. Michael watched it unfold, his stomach in knots, waiting for the inevitable. No one suspected him. Not yet. But it was only a matter of time. Jennifer began to notice the change in him. How he barely spoke. How he flinched at sudden noises. How he woke in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. He pushed her away, brushing off her questions, blaming stress, but he could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how close the horror really was. Jennifer saw it in his eyes, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. Something was eating Michael alive, but she didn't know how to reach him anymore. Weeks had passed since Alex's body was discovered, but for Michael, time had stopped. Every morning as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he braced himself for the inevitable. A knock at the door, the flash of police lights, the cold weight of handcuffs around his wrists. He lived in the grip of fear, suffocating under the weight of his own guilt. It was no longer just a secret. It was a living thing, clawing at him from the inside, rotting him away. He couldn't keep pretending. One evening after Jennifer had gone to bed, Michael sat alone in the darkened living room. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. His mind drifted back, again, to that night. The knife in his hand, Alex's terrified eyes, the warm blood spreading across the floor. He had convinced himself that killing Alex would bring him closure, control, peace, but there was no peace. Only this. His hands curled into fists. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't keep living like this. Michael rose from the couch and walked to the phone, his fingers hovering over the buttons. He hesitated. If they didn't suspect him yet, maybe he still had a chance to escape this, to fix it. But there was nothing left to fix. Taking a slow breath, he dialed. The line clicked, and a tired voice answered. Michael swallowed hard, his voice steady but hollow. I want to make a confession. I killed Alex Carter. The words left his lips, and with them, the crushing weight of silence. The officer on the other end asked him to stay where he was. Michael simply nodded to himself, though no one could see him. He wasn't running anymore. Half an hour later, the flashing red and blue lights bled through the curtains. The knock on the door was soft, almost polite, but Michael had been expecting it. He didn't resist as they entered, didn't flinch when the cold metal closed around his wrists. Jennifer woke to the commotion. Barefoot, she rushed into the living room, her heart pounding. Then she saw him, Michael, in handcuffs. The breath left her body. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice barely more than air. Michael turned to her, his eyes dark and hollow, filled with something that almost resembled relief. But he said nothing as they led him out into the night. The trial was merciless. His confessions sealed his fate. The lawyers argued for leniency, claimed he had been pushed to the edge, that his mental state should be considered. But the facts remained. Michael had taken a life, and now his own was being taken in return. The sentence: life in prison, parole after 25 years. Jennifer was left with the wreckage of everything they had built. The perfect family, the perfect marriage. It had all been an illusion, and now the world had seen it shatter. The stares from neighbors, the whispers in grocery store aisles, the reporters who wouldn't leave her alone. She had lost everything, and she had no idea how to start over. For Alex's family, there was no closure. No relief in knowing that the man who had killed their son would spend decades behind bars. Because nothing could change the fact that their child was gone. Their home, once filled with his laughter, was now a tomb of memories, a reminder of a life stolen too soon. Nothing could ever make this right. Nothing ever would. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing, true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.